CI/CD at AWS, and today I'm here with Akshat. Akshat, what the hell are we going to talk about today?
Well, we're going to talk about the unfulfilled promises of cloud providers, and then what do we do about it to fulfill that for them. Let me tell you a little story about where it all started. The year is 2006. The very first commercial cloud provider, AWS, decides to come out to the market and promises two things. It promises low cost to operate your services with all the agility in the world. Fast forward to 20 years almost since then. Look at any study, I reckon the two biggest challenges that organizations also face happen to be the same exact thing. Uh, Cloud truly brought us unparalleled possibilities, but it's also brought a lot of challenges along with it, complexity, which is leading to a lot of misconfigurations, overspend, all of that, of course, translating into your cloud bills at the end of the day. This is what we solve, bringing back that centralized visibility into the cloud, at the same time enabling the wider audience in order to leverage cloud in the right way.
And we're going to talk a lot about infrastructure as code, platform engineering, and continuous deployment and continuous delivery. So I'm eager to see that. But before taking you into the technical topics, I have a new place. Some people might know that, and there's still a lot of white in my background. I'm trying to fill that with stickers. So everyone getting on my show gets the pick. I have 3 for you today, and you need to tell me which one you want to get up next. The first one is one of community.aws, which is focused on delivering content by the AWS community. The second one is obviously a pizza. Yes, right. It has AWS on it. And the last one, I think that you're based in Germany, so this beer might resonate with you as well, right?
Oh, there's no doubt about that. That's the one you should be having.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much. And I will put that in later. But before we now go into technical topics, actually, who are you? How did we meet? You're not my usual kind of suspect, which is an AWS community builder or an AWS hero or something in that part of the community. So who the hell are you?
I'm a true platform engineer at heart. This is how you can describe me. But I have had roles as a developer. I've been responsible for security of cloud infrastructure at enterprise scale. So I'm a little bit of everything. That brings a lot of experience in terms of what is that we really need out there today that is missing. Um, I've worked for larger organizations in the past, looking at cloud adoption at scale and the challenges that goes along with it. And what we'll talk about today is direct results and effect of my experiences and my team's experience with that very thing. So yeah, very excited to talk about that and also to perhaps share it with the wider community that you have what StackGuardian does.
Yeah, thank you for being on and for those details around yourself. But before we go into StackGuardian as a platform, what the hell is CD for you? There's 100 ways of saying that.
Absolutely. It's definitely a very opinionated word. That is what a platform of today needs to be, opinionated, when it comes to the continuous deployment part of things. A CD for us is mainly around infrastructure deployment, everything that goes into eventually deploying your application, which is also not a very different process today. Yeah, that's an opinion, again, to express. A lot of that goes hand in hand together. Your infrastructure is what hosts application. The more there is to infrastructure, the less you need to do on the application side. So we try to cover on StackGuardian platform a lot of what has to do with the infrastructure itself. Now, questions usually back to the person who wants to understand what CD is what you call your infrastructure. It could be your containers on Kubernetes or the infrastructure where your Kubernetes is running.
Yeah, that makes sense. So then continuous, so CD means continuous deployment for you then, or more continuous delivery or continuous dilemma or something like that?
Yeah. A continuous deployment is very much an important aspect of what continuous delivery would look like, going from one environment to another, promoting your code. So it's one and the same, again, an opinion around what a CD is. It is any and everything for different organizations. They carve different things into what a CD may look like for them.
Cool. Thank you so much. And for those listening, I personally had to look at the website of StackGuardian. I never played around with the product yet, so Akshat is going to need to answer a lot of stupid questions from someone that sees the platform for the first time today, and I'm eager to dive into that. So maybe let's start a little bit to talk about StackGuardian and when did you start, what the aim is, and what people are you addressing with the platform?
Right. So as I said, StackGuardian is really a direct effect of the experiences my team and I had when being in different roles. Some as a developer, often as cloud engineers and operators as well. And one of the things that we saw is like uh, Terraform adoption, which really blew in around 2018, 19, and ramped up from there on. Um, and suddenly there was this category of what you would call tacos, Terraform automation and collaboration software. So this is where StackGuardian really uh, was took birth in a way. We started first by addressing the challenges around Terraform. While it is a great tool to run infrastructure, maybe individually, where it all becomes very complex is when you have to collaborate on it. Collaborate with your team members, and then also bringing on board the development teams, which are way more in number compared to a very few cloud and platform engineers. So what we started is to empower that bunch of individuals, which are way more in number. They want to leverage the promise of the cloud. Anybody can use cloud. You get started by bringing your credit card, and you're set deploying things into the cloud, the great services and so forth. But when that is done at a large scale, at enterprise scale, that really went out of control very quickly because everybody started deploying those abundance of resources that you could create in cloud in no time. And we saw a need and an opportunity, basically, in being able to bring that control back to this group of individuals who are supposed to manage infrastructure, at the same time enable and democratize how cloud can be leveraged by any and everyone in that organization, giving that confidence back to that central team.
Okay, so that sounds a little bit like the target audience of the platform is mainly platform engineers, maybe operation engineers today, with the idea of making cloud accessible to developers that maybe don't have a lot of knowledge about the cloud infrastructure that we have today. So that kind of makes sense. There is other vendors in the market, and maybe we can talk about that at the end of the session.
Mhm.
Um, you're mainly working out of Germany right now, is what I heard, or where are you based in, or what is your
Yes.
regionality
Yeah,
where you're
no,
focused on?
absolutely. Well, StackGuardian is actually a Belgian company, but we mainly sell in Germany. In the DACH area is where we focus, a lot of Benelux as well. In the meantime, and we're moving west. That is our strategy at this point in time. So we have a lot of regulatory or compliance heavy customers who need not just infrastructure automation, but also from a very compliant centric point of view, so that any particular resource that goes into the cloud is always vetted against a bunch of those corporate policies, whatever good looks like in that organization.
Cool. So then maybe a target audience could be Argentina if you're watching us from there, as they are very regulated as far as I know, especially in the cloud market.
Absolutely.
Cool. With that brief intro, do we want to start looking a little bit into demo and what the hell the platform looks like before we bore everyone talking about the history of StackGuardian?
No, absolutely, absolutely. To start with, maybe to give a little bit of where we come from and then how we decided to structure our platform. We took the approach of uh, the personas that we saw. So we talked about the platform engineers, the operations team. We talked about the developers and security as well, a key aspect of that infrastructure automation, especially at that large scale. What we decided to do is to divide hence the platform in a way that we build interfaces that are relevant to these user groups.
Mhm.
And hence the platform stands on three main tenets. One being the discover module, as we call it, the next being a develop module, and finally a deploy module. At this time, I'll bring up my screen share so that we can quickly walk through it. It is already something that you would find on our website as well. Could be a good way to make the audience also understand how do we go about realizing the promises again of the cloud providers as we started with. So again, the platform standing on three main tenets: the discover, develop, and deploy. The way we start is by connecting into your cloud account. This is what we do in the discover part of things. We connect into AWS, Azure, GCP, the three main cloud providers that we support. And we have written over 1,800 plus automated checks. These checks are derived from cost best practices, cloud providers best practices, regulations that are out there, CIS, CISA benchmarks, and so forth, PCI, more industry specific regulations as well. And we help you then understand what is the current state of infrastructure that you're running. Call it perhaps the mess that is already existing in your cloud environment for us to surface that, so that you could also take action and understand what is the priority on things. Often, when such discovery is done, maybe by cloud providers, because there are also tooling available from them, it's very hard to know what is that first bunch of things that you want to focus on. So we very much focus on deciding and helping you choose those 15 different checks out of those 1,800 that you should first look at solving. Not just that, once such a discovery is done, such a visibility is brought to you through a single pane of glass into your multiple cloud accounts across multiple cloud providers, we also leverage those checks in order to build proactive guardrails. These guardrails are built on what we call SG policy, a policy that helps you define in a very simple JSON format what a resource should be allowed to have as an attribute or not.
Mhm.
Um, we start there, and that is where we saw a need for a guardrail, a policy engine, if you may. And we decided to build our own policy engine because we saw the ones available in the market right now are either very complex to work with, or they require a lot of plumbing in your in your CI/CD pipelines. So StackGuardian comes pre-built with that policy engine itself, and we call it Tirith.
And that policy engine is then also going to be applied to infrastructure that is later deployed through StackGuardian, right? So initially, okay, cool.
Yeah. So the way we institutionalize your infrastructure delivery when such guardrails are in place is that yes, we understand this is how your environment looks like from discovery. From there on, we give you here are those 50 policies that we have derived from everything that looks bad in your environment today, so that when you deploy your next resource that might breach that particular policy, it will automatically be stopped even before the deployment happens. So in the world of Terraform, that would mean perhaps looking at your Terraform plan and understanding if there's anything non-compliant from the policy point of view. Similarly for CloudFormation and so forth. We were quick to realize when we started that the infrastructure as code world is not going to stay only with Terraform. It is going to diversify, and it has been so. Pulumi taking a fair share now. There is CloudFormation. There is ARM even picking up as we see. So there's a lot of what we decided to do with the policy engine that we built is to be able to support those multiple technologies so that you could have your opinion on how you want to go about creating your infrastructure, but always relying on that one single guardian, that policy that could make sure that your Pulumi, your Terraform, your open tofu configurations can all be vetted before they go to your production, your demo, and other environments.
Cool. So I will link Tirith to the show notes. I think there's way more to talk about. So if we now focus on policies, we're gonna have like 2 hours recorded before we actually
Absolutely.
get to the platform.
Yeah.
So let's move on towards like from a discovery perspective. We now go to the development phase, is what I'm hearing.
Exactly.
And
Absolutely.
how do you enable developers to develop infrastructure at the end?
Very well.
Because isn't it just YAML these days?
Yeah, very much so, actually. And you might have known about the hate of the developers to work with a tool that they don't understand, especially something that they're not incentivized for, the likes of Terraform and so forth. That is why we see misconfigurations being driven out there. That's why we see a need for a policy engine that could make sure that any infrastructure configuration that goes into your cloud providers, your cloud environments are pre-vetted, that they're proactively scanned. So the way we go about it is to first of all enable um, platform engineers, the operation engineers, to build reusable templates. These are building blocks for example, you can see over here a VPC, a network deployment, followed by some VM deployment using perhaps CloudFormation for whatever reason. If there's a strategy between two different divisions inside that organization to use two different toolings, you could all build your building blocks in different languages and then combine, maybe throw some Ansible in it as well. And what we allow you to do is to build a blueprint out of it, a blueprint that is heterogeneous in its ways, that it provides you possibility to plug Terraform into CloudFormation, into Ansible. And we see that mix very often. Terraform serving for the infrastructure part of the equation, the Ansible serving for the configuration management part of the equation. And that all can then be provided to the end users, which is where we bring in our deploy module. Once those blueprints are crafted, they can be leveraged through an interface that is
Mhm.
specifically built for with developers in mind, specifically built with infrastructure end users in mind. That they like to work with the ClickUps, they like to work with a way that they could choose different things that are already available without needing to gain knowledge in 500 ways that you can deploy a VPC. And as an organization, as a platform engineer, you could say there are 5 different ways to deploy a network in my organization. And your end users can then choose from those 5 different ways, those 5 different blueprints, and leverage it in many ways. One being what we call StackGuardian no code. But we also provide in a similar way a CLI to access those, which could very well be backed by a YAML or a JSON configuration. Or you could use a Terraform provider that we also provide, or simply go into using our API if you need more control on how your what we call stacks out of these blueprints should be deployed. So these are the 3 things that go in together, starting from giving visibility to the security, to the governance side of things, then enabling the platform engineers, and then eventually enabling the developers in order to leverage what their platform engineers are doing.
Cool. So then let's kind of, as we wanted to focus on the CD, on the deployment part,
Yes.
gonna ask one more question, and then we can go into looking at that part of the platform. So what I would like to understand is here, out of the discovery, can I now automatically create those reusable compositions, right, or reusable pieces of infrastructure as code, um, before then kind of deploying them going forward? So can I get from the wild west that we see in a lot of cloud accounts towards a more structured way of provisioning cloud infrastructure using the first 2 modules?
Yeah, no, very well. Absolutely. A great question. And we often see a need for that as well in our customers, in our prospects, and so forth. Where it all starts really is by us allowing you to leverage importing of Terraform modules. There are several technologies that are out there available which can read your infrastructure, help you build your Terraform code, structure the way that you want, and then we provide a way to import those state files generated by Terraform import or other such tools that exist out there. And this way, we have seen a lot of organizations putting effort into translating that ClickUps infrastructure into infrastructure as code as well. Um, we do want to also build something that will help you read infrastructure at the same time, like we currently do, collect an inventory. We're writing an RFC around it, also that we can validate. But at the same time, we also see tools like Terraform and OpenTofu need to bring more support for importing beyond what is currently and rudimentary available.
Yeah, and if you stick to the AWS side of the things, right? CloudFormation has
Yes,
that CloudFormation export nowadays, right, where you can select resources and
absolutely.
then it exports to CloudFormation. I'm not saying that's perfect, right? But that's kind of what I have in mind from that perspective, right? If that's something that you could integrate in those first 2 modules, I think that would be in value add as well.
Absolutely. So this is where the discovery is really leading to. We started with the policy aspect of things.
Mm-hmm.
So we do build automated policies out of the discovery that we do. but that all leads into then thinking as well. While we have that inventory, can we convert that into infrastructure as code as well? So going into very similar direction to your question as you asked.
Cool. Then let's dive into CD. Now we finished discovery. We are building some modules. I understand those modules that we are building as a developer are now best practice deployments or best practice compositions connected in pieces of infrastructure, maybe also connected with configuration as code. How does that look like in the platform, and how do we take that and deploy that into certain targets, right? Which could be AWS or it could be Azure or GCP, as you mentioned before.
Very well. I think it would be a great chance to bring up the platform to showcase how do we really go about doing that. I'll share my screen, and I hope you can see a screen showing a
Yes.
list of organizations. So to the platform, the very first thing that you encounter when logging in with your user is a list of the different tenants that you're part of, or as we call them, organizations, all for multi-tenancy, data segregation, and so forth on a SaaS platform like us. I'll take you to an organization that is pre-created, and the first thing that you will see is that discovery view, giving you an insight into where does your cloud environment, how does it look like today from the cost point of view, from the security point of view, and from the compliance point of view. These are all divided between different checks that we conduct, those 1800 plus checks that I talked about, and also then gives you a little bit of information, a high level information on what policies, those proactive policies that are enforced, and how many of them are passing, failing, and in different states. But to start with, what we do is to connect your cloud environments for the very first. This is a place where you would integrate into multiple cloud environments. We support AWS organization. You could also integrate into your Azure management groups, and we can read all the different subscriptions that you have underneath it. And that is how you onboard cloud environments onto StackGuardian platform. We also provide, again, a very programmatic way to approach this, because we often see a platform like ours is rolled out at scale in organizations, since we want to enable those end users, those developers. We also see a very programmatic way of, call it, building shells on our platform that can then be offboarded onto the development teams, who can then leverage these subscriptions, these cloud connectors, as we call them, in order to connect into them. This is what we also leverage in order to read how does your environment look like today. The permissions and so forth is something that you can grant us at the IAM levels in these different cloud providers, and then we're restricted to only be able to read that and scan that against those policies that we maintain.
So if I have 500 AWS accounts, do I need to have 500 connections, or
Not at
what's the
all.
approach?
Yeah, what you can build is, you would say that a group on our platform. So it would be a connector group in this case, connecting your multiple accounts. Then we use organization read-only access in order to read every single account inside that organization, and then you can selectively bring a few or all of them at the same time.
Okay, makes sense. Cool. Then how do I take library items and deploy them?
Perfect. Let's go to that. I'll start by showing you what a library looks like. A library is, again, a combination of, could be very well a combination of different technologies put together. So for this very demo, I'm going to use a VNet VM deployment, which also then deploys a web server. It could be, think of it as deploying a resource group that then deploys a VNet inside it, and a virtual machine that serves as a jump host. So this is a way to bootstrap perhaps your subscriptions in Azure, often used by our customers as well. And then you throw in some Ansible into it in order to provision, like to configure and manage that particular VM that got deployed. For an end user, the process of using this template and is simply creating a stack out of it. A stack is basically what is going to contain all the particular that instance of configuration for that VNet VM and this web server deployment. You pass in different parameters that are required by each of the template. So I'm going to create a resource group that I'm going to call test1235. I'm going to create a VNet name. All of these different templates that you see are backed by some Terraform code, which are
Okay.
pre-crafted by your cloud engineers, operation engineers. It could be one of the many templates that we as StackGuardian also provide and manage for you. But since we really serve large organizations, we often see these modules, these templates being written by the organizations themselves.
Makes sense.
Yeah,
So this is where I'm combining different existing templates and I'm
exactly.
combining them to be my, let's call it, target deployment, right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, good.
uh, I'll just deploy something here and then go into next. Then I choose what deployment configuration I want to choose. This is where you get to choose which cloud provider to target. In this case, we're looking into Azure deployment. So I'm going to choose one of the connectors that connects into Azure. And then I'm going to copy this configuration across all the different modules that are going to be used to build this stack. And it's as simple as creating this stack, which starts the process of creating a resource group, a VNet, and everything else that makes part of this template group, without the end user need to write single line of Terraform code or understand what is really going behind the scenes, because that hard work is already being done
Yeah,
by
exactly. Yeah,
cloud engineers.
that's the point, right? So you need to have someone creating those templates and then also maintaining them and making sure that they actually then also kind of are able to be deployed.
Exactly,
Okay.
absolutely. This is what happens and is done inside a template group. This is where we started.
Mm-hmm.
A template group, as I mentioned, is a combination of several templates.
Okay.
Each template in itself is backed by some Terraform code living in perhaps this particular repository over here. You could then reference also a branch, a tag, and so forth, a working directory in which things are living. And you can also do life cycle management on top of what is deployed. So all of this templates that you see over here, they're all going to have a certain version that you're going to deploy. You can retire these versions, telling your end users to migrate to a newer version because you have upgraded the module. So we often simplify that process of, as I mentioned, lifecycle management around your infrastructure as code for these end users as well.
Mm-hmm. That
Perfect.
sounds interesting. That is kind of similar to what we see in custom blueprints for Code Catalyst. Um,
Yeah.
and it's a missing feature in things like Backstage, right? Where out of the box, there is no lifecycle management support for templates.
Absolutely. And this feature we really did not build with knowing already that it will have such a huge impact. But we did see an adoption. We did see a rise in the request for the features around it. So we brought things like the application date. So you could say a particular template, for example, this resource group will be retired at the end of this month, so that anyone who is using it will already be notified and will require to use the newer version.
So
You
how
could
would we
build
then upgrade to a newer version?
very well. An upgrade process is very much along the lines of what you would do
Okay.
inside updating a stack. A
Mm-hmm.
stack could be updated from one version to another like this. I like an upgrade. In this case, I'm going to downgrade to a version 14. And when you go further, it will tell you what kind of operations it is going to perform on any of the workflows that are contained inside that stack. So
But
in this case,
so sorry, but it's not only workflows, right? It also contains infrastructure as code that is now changed.
exactly, every infrastructure as code over here is forming a workflow in itself. And you could control what happens at that workflow level. We do not combine the state files for each of these Terraform deployments that are happening. So you can take control of them individually, and you can decide perhaps when degrading this particular VNet from version 8 to 7, it's going to break a few things. So you can go about running a plan to understand what is that you need to do in order to keep things running, or perhaps build a plan in order to downgrade and degrade. So we also provide you that, call it staging, where you can see the changes that you're bringing in your workflow, in your Terraform code, and how they should impact or affect your current
Okay,
deployments.
how do I see the Terraform code or the Ansible code or whatever that it's here?
Yeah,
Is that
so absolutely. So what happens is, as I mentioned, every particular workflow is pointing to a Git repository at the end of the day. What we do is when you run infrastructure deployment, we pull that code. We first of all gather any policies. I'll talk about that just in a second. But then we gather that infrastructure as code from your environment as well, from your Git environment in this case. Run Terraform on it to generate a caller code on demand. And this is what is then run against the particular infrastructure or cloud connector that you have created. So all of this plumbing is something that we do in the
mm-hmm.
background. often there is a need to also maintain a copy of that caller code on your side. What you could do in that case is, instead of using a template, you could use a Git repository. And you could directly point our workflows to a Git repository that contains that Terraform code for you. So we also support that out of the box. In this case, of course, you will be managing the life cycle of that code in Git without using our templates and all the deprecation and lifecycle management that we bring in.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Okay. Going back to the deployment itself. So in this case, what you will see is that the deployment is going through, it created a virtual machine and so forth. And let me take you to this particular deployment. Here we're trying to deploy a virtual machine, and then we've been able to successfully do it. You would be able to see an infra cost estimation here as well of what is the monthly cost of the resource that is created, how many resources. So we also read your state files in order to understand and give you a visual into every single resource that you deploy. Many customers also use this as a way to have an API into these deployments that we do. You could leverage that and put this using webhooks in your CMDBs. You can configure drift checks, which are automatically taking place on the infrastructure. I'll show you an example of it as well. Or you could invoke a webhook on your side, which triggers maybe a Slack, a Teams message, or an email saying that there's a drift detected. Or you could also automatically reconcile that drift by refreshing your state, adapting or adopting that drift, or redoing the deployment in order to fix that drift, converge it back to how the configuration looks like.
Okay, and this is all Terraform based right now, right?
This is all, yeah, absolutely. The things that you see over here, we call them facts or workflow facts. These facts can look very similar for OpenTofu, for Pulumi, for Kubernetes. So what we have done, we took all these different technologies, widely used, battle tested technologies used in the enterprise world, and we build a single pane of glass, which looks very similar to the end users at the end of the day. If I go to the Ansible workflow, you have a similar compliance checks that were performed. In this case, Ansible is not deploying any resources, so you're not seeing them. But your end user is accustomed to a very similar interface whenever they deploy Ansible, Helm charts, Kubernetes, Terraform, and so forth.
I'm a little bit confused with the term workflows here.
Mhm.
So what the hell is, so a workflow in the CI/CD perspective for me is always a multi-level deployment step somehow.
Yeah.
Is this so here it is being used like different deployments of a different deployments of a template, but with
Right.
only one step, like it's deployed or it's not deployed. So
Yeah,
do I,
let me explain you that a little bit. A workflow on our platform is a unit of deployment. It could represent a Terraform code, it could represent, as you see, Ansible, and so forth. These workflows can also live by themselves without being a part of a stack. A stack is where you would combine a logical set of things. In this case, we're bootstrapping perhaps an Azure subscription with some resource group deployed in VNet and network, and some VM inside it. And hence I call it a stack. But a workflow can also represent, as you mentioned, a multi-level deployment. And in this case, what you can do, or rather take you to the last workflow, where you could build several steps which go one after the other in order to do the full process of stack deployment as well. So again, going back to the first statement that we made about being opinionated, this is what we allow you to do with the workflows as well. Just when we separate workflows into several workflows, forming a stack, it allows you to control things at a more granular level.
Mhm.
But your workflow could very well describe the whole stack. It could very well deploy all the bits and pieces required in order to build this Azure resource group that I created with network inside it by creating another step that does only one thing, creating network, another step that deploys a VM, yet another step that runs Ansible in order to configure manage it as well. So that different granularity is what is allowed to you, because often what we see, and the reason for that, maybe this will make it more clear, is that there's more of configuration management that you will run from now on as part of your day 2, day 3 operations than running redeployments of Terraform.
Okay.
And by separating it in a different block, you could very well build, for example, what we call, actions. These actions, they allow you to perform only a particular action on all the different workflows inside a stack. So you could build an action that runs only Ansible without touching your Terraform ever.
Okay, got that. Now, if I have, so if I see one stack as a combination of my application that is being deployed somewhere, that's what I understood, right?
Right.
Now, I want to take this stack and deploy it to multiple environments.
Perfect. Yeah.
How
So
would that happen? Would that be different workflows added over here, or would we now have an overarching workflow for that stack? What's the
yeah,
approach that you're suggesting here for
very well.
using this?
Let me take you back to that template that deployed it. This template group is what we deployed, and you can see a usage tab that tells you every single time this particular template is being deployed. If you want to deploy it several times, we provide you the CLI, we provide you an API in order to approach that as well. But then you have a complete overview of every single time this particular template is deployed. You could also see how the older versions are being deployed and where are they being used. So there could be these older versions that were also created and used, and you could simply go to this particular stack and decide to upgrade it to number 60.
Okay, makes sense, but that doesn't answer my question.
Yeah. Well, let's go back to the CLI. This is where perhaps most of the answer lies. When things need to be done at that scale, we provide a CLI as well, which is where you can then interact with our API and decide to deploy this stack as many times as you want.
Okay, but
It
that
is
so
also,
so so what I'm thinking of is actually, sorry, just trying to take you into my
yeah,
thought process
mhm,
is like, okay, now I have a stack, I have an application that is kind of ready to be deployed, and
yeah,
now I'm in an enterprise and I want to automate the promotion through that. So
yeah,
my way of looking at CI/CD is 100% automated. That means it starts from developer pushing code and then it
absolutely.
ends in a production environment. But before going to production, there needs to be some steps. Is there a
Yeah.
possibility today to automate that process in the platform, or is that something that I would need to kind of build within that workflow piece that you showed me earlier?
Right. So what you would do is integrate perhaps deployment of your stack, maybe a
Mm-hmm.
staging environment before going to production inside your bigger CI/CD pipeline, wherever you run that.
Mm-hmm.
Your application is now built. You run some smoke tests, your functional tests, your regression tests, and now you deploy infrastructure for it where it is being deployed. Perhaps the infrastructure is already deployed. All you do is rerun the Ansible deployment so that it takes the fresh code that is now made available, brought onto that infrastructure staging environment, and then this could trigger a promotion. This promotion could be triggered through our platform as well, absolutely. And this is where I would take you to showing a functionality called workflow chaining. So we can act on different events. An event could be a workflow chaining event. In this case, a successful run of this particular workflow can trigger another workflow, which
Okay.
could be part of another stack, that stack that deploys things into the production environment and so forth. So we provide various ways of promoting and linking that all together, workflow chaining being one. We also see integrations from outside where people manage their own CI/CD pipelines and calling our APIs and CLIs in order to trigger and promote code from one stage to another.
Question on that one. An example here would be using uh, code pipeline that would then orchestrate different stacks through the StackGuardian CLI, right? So
Absolutely.
okay, got it.
Yeah,
Okay.
it can be done. Or you can, again, use the workflow chaining in order to automatically go from one stack to another stack and so forth.
Okay, cool. Are you considering to make that level of that part of the orchestration kind of a high level component of the platform as well?
Uh, you mean like providing a possibility to go from one workflow of a stack
Yeah.
to
So
another? Yeah,
what I'm thinking of is like go if you go to back to the stacks, right? So
right.
just an overview. I think you have multiple stacks over there.
Let's go to this and usage. There are two stacks over here.
No, I wanted to go. There's the to look at the so if you I don't know if you can click up
Oh,
there on
perhaps. Yeah,
stacks. Yeah, this one. Okay, so now this being the stacks, right? Now for each of these stacks, can I define a promotion and CI/CD workflow for those stacks on the stack level? that would be something that would be interesting, because then you kind of become that level of overarching deployment management thing at the end, right? That's what I was thinking of at the end.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We see that needs to be integrated a lot more into the CI side of things as well, because
True.
promotion of code is also part of your application code, which we don't manage. So even if it could be a grand idea to build something, an overarching way of going from one stack to another, if one stack succeeded, we often see a stage in between that requires that application code to be tested, processed, whatever needs to be done. While that may sound like a great idea, we do not see a lot of practical use case around that. Um, and hence, the way we go about it right now is to allow users to do that promotion through the CI platforms that they already use. When their code is ready, which is often that stage, that stop, they can go from one stack to another and promoting their code from one stack to another.
Okay, that makes sense. So how do you so what do you see your customers integrating with then? So
Yeah.
what is the CI/CD tools that you see calling those
Yeah,
stacks?
absolutely. So we see a heavy usage of ServiceNow, for example. There is a service catalog available, which simply says deploy a new resource group, which actually in the world of a platform engineer at that organization means deploying 15 different resources inside it, some tagging policies along with it, some cost allocation tags and so forth and whatnot. So what we do is provide that integration from ServiceNow, which can automatically call our stack. It leverages our CLI, our APIs in order to make that happen. The background work, call it, the front end that you saw is then offboarded to the tools like ServiceNow. And what you happen to see on our platform is do that heavy lifting in the backend done. So we do then the orchestration of the 15 different things that need to be deployed, informing back that platform, the deployment is ready to be now leveraged by the end user. It also serves directly into a very common use case, those long wait times, lead times, when tickets are created for these platform engineers. So we try to meet them there. Those, those tickets that they have always dealt with now do not need a manual resolution, but it could be offboarded to StackGuardian, which may mean that it will trigger some policies. In this case, some cost policies that were evaluated, that nothing should cost more than $30, but it did cost 88 in this
Mhm.
case, and end up warning the user, which could also be a very well approval required by their managers and so forth, which you can define on our platform. Um, so that flow can be automated like this. So we see the front ends lying in another platform, people using StackGuardian for its backend, but we also see it otherwise, where our front end is being used in order to call the backends, which are GitHub Actions, perhaps, that the users are using, or Jenkins that they're using, or any number of tools that we see integration into. And for that reason, we provide a special type of template, a template that we called a workflow step template that could help you integrate into tools, Perlumi, TerraGrunt, CDK, and so forth. But it can also help you integrate into platforms out there, calling Jenkins APIs in order to trigger jobs there, or GitHub Actions in order to run those GitHub Actions. So taking, call it, inspiration from a lot of what you will see on Backstage, then we being that front end, and then the back end has been offboarded to another platform. So we see both of those use cases and we've been able to serve them.
Cool. Thank you so much. So, as we're kind of approaching the end of what we had set ourselves, right,
Mhm.
Akshat? What are the competitors that you track today? What are the people that you compete with? Um,
Look, the space is very saturated. As we know, there are tons of CI/CD platforms that can do very similar job. People migrating even from the likes of Jenkins, which was once built to be the CI tool, and then suddenly is doing Terraform orchestration as well. Without naming any particular competition, what we really try to focus on is enabling developers. While we're a general purpose workflow engine, you learn that by seeing the workflow step templates and so forth that I showed you, uh, we try to be a highly specialized infrastructure as code platform. We want to be that management layer for infrastructure, at the same time be that dev portal that integrates into that backend. And that modularity allows us to be a backend for your infrastructure orchestration or front end for wherever you are doing your infrastructure or other automations. And that is how we like to see ourselves, enabling more developers, democratizing cloud to be not leveraged just by cloud experts, Johannes, like you and me, but also by the end users who are definitely more in number, with more requests they've been raising, that more work they can do by themselves.
Yeah, so I'm asking that question because it's pretty interesting. I've had a session with Sören from TerraMate,
Yeah,
and I've had a session with
yeah,
Paul from System Init.
yeah,
They kind of tell me similar stories with a little bit of a different approach, right?
absolutely.
But kind of go into the same direction. So that's why I was asking, like, are these people that you're tracking? Yes or no, right? That is kind of what I'm interested in, and it's very cool from my perspective, right, to not be attached to any vendor, right, neither to a cloud provider, not to any of the CD tools, and it's amazing to be able to share that with the community. So thank you
Absolutely.
so much for
Pleasure's all mine.
presenting and for taking the time through this. Um, I'm sure that people will have some follow-up questions. So there's two kind of directions of follow-up questions that I've been seeing. One is, how can I get hold of StackGuardian? How can I try it out? And the other piece is, well, how are you going to develop StackGuardian further? What's the strategic direction? So let's start with the strategic direction first, and then we can go into how people can reach out to you and to StackGuardian itself. So
Right,
where are you
right.
going?
Perfect. Call it, we have a strategy about how do we want to go about that direction of where we're leading our platform. In all honesty, Johannes, we have tried to do product roadmaps from the very beginning of our days. It's requirement often to do that, but to be able to be truly true to that product roadmap has been a challenge, especially because of evolving requirements, use cases, and so forth. So we really put that bet on our customers today, that all what we want to develop, that we see could be our USP, is derived from how can we bring the most value to the customer. And hence, we open source our roadmap as well. So you could go onto our GitHub feedback repo and join the discussion there to even influence that decision on what product, what requests that we're accepting, how we're building those features when we're rolling them out. So our approach is to really be governed, be driven by what our customers are needing, what our users will see most important in that use case. And it is very volatile in nature. That's the nature of startups, and we want to be like that, be volatile. So we have rather learned to work with that volatility, things changing from one month to another.
Cool, that makes sense. So now I hope that a bunch of people will be interested to learn more and to maybe also try StackGuardian out. Can I just go to stackguardian.io and start building on it, or do I need
Absolutely.
to enter my credit card first?
No credit card required. You get onto the platform just by signing up. You will have some help reach out to you as well in case you would need guidance. You could join our Slack community to ask questions right away, as well as we have office hours that you can join for Tirith and some open source work that we do. So there's several ways and mechanisms to really get started very quickly.
Cool, thank you. That makes sense. And now, if people want to talk to Akshat, who has been presenting today, where do they find you? Do they go to Twitter? No, sorry, X, LinkedIn,
Yeah.
Blue Sky, whatever. What's the preferred contact method for you?
So I'm very much available over LinkedIn and definitely over team at stackguardian.io. Plus the Slack community that I mentioned. Most of us are very approachable through our Slack community.
Cool. Then I'll link that in the show notes as well. And
Perfect.
yeah, gonna thank you again for taking the time to present today. It was a fantastic session. I learned a lot about how Stack Guardian operates and what the idea behind is.
Johannes, my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye bye.
Bye.